Y'all, I went to Old Salem and I asked them about all their weird history and craziest 300-year-old drama, and I have to tell y'all about it. But first, here's a history lesson. Old Salem is in Winston-Salem. It was the original settlement made by the Moravians. The Moravians were the first group of Protestants. They originated in the Bohemia region of the Czech Republic. They showed up in Germany after being genocided by the Catholics, and then to flee to the New World, they were funded by a guy named Count Von Zizendorf. That's for real. They ended up in what is now Pennsylvania. They came down and they bought 10,000 acres of land in an area that they called Wachovia, and one of those settlements was Salem, that is now Winston-Salem. Now, Old Salem is a living history museum that utilizes the original buildings of Salem to tell the stories through tour guides and historians about the Moravians and the enslaved people who lived on this land right before America became a country. And I went there to ask about 300-year-old drama, and here's what I learned. So first of all, one of the most beloved ghost stories out of North Carolina is the story of the Red Man that talks about Andreas Kremser, who lived in the Single Brothers building, which, by the way, I did not realize until this trip, housed men ages 12 to 72, and it operated kind of like a crazy frat house, not like the esteemed group of conservative, reserved gentlemen that I'd been led to believe, which is why it was shocking to me to learn that the Red Man was 19 years old. Kremser was apparently a bit of a nuisance, and he was warned not to work in the basement of the Single Brothers house because of unstable working conditions. So when it caved in on him and it killed him, historical documents show that everybody was like, well, we tried to tell him and he just didn't listen. He also was a little bit of an annoyance. So the pranks of his that have continued after his death, along with the sightings of him running around the basement of the Single Brothers house, are pretty indicative of how he was as a teenager when he died. Of course, there are other crazy stories out of the Single Brothers house. There used to be a resident who would sleep sprint out of the top story window onto the main street of town. This gentleman would start off at one end of the hallway in his sleep and run all the way down through a worship center, Superman himself out the top story window, and land safely on his hands and knees. And folks said that he was held by angels because if he had just been walking and dropped straight down, he would have hit barrels and other things below the 20-foot drop out of the window that inevitably would have killed him. He would wake up, get himself right, and then go back inside like nothing had happened. And the more I talked to these tour guides, the more small town gossip I got about Salem, where I learned these were just small town weirdos like you and me. For example, I got to see the John Vogler house, which was the home of a wealthy man who decided to not listen to the church/government who wanted him to not flaunt his wealth. He started making himself independently wealthy and said, it's my money, I'll do what I want. So when he built a big flashy house for him to do metal works out of, he caused a little bit of a riot. But the funniest story out of this is that one of his daughters rejected a man in town who, in his indignation for being rejected, took out a very long essay type ad in the local newspaper where he advertised wanting a rich woman who also knew her way around the kitchen, and she needed to be very beautiful, but it wasn't important what he looked like because, it wasn't important. And this article went on and on and on. Everybody in town knew exactly what he was hot mad about. If you've never been to Old Salem, Christmas is the time to go. They have programming every weekend from now until December 21st, and Saturdays at Salem are particularly special. They have their Joy of Christmas tours in the evening. They have Christmas Salem Saturdays from 10 to 4. These include Moravian markets and bakery tastings, and they're run in conjunction with the Moravian Archives tours and Christmas Fest, and the Moravian Music Foundation's having concerts, and the Wachovia Historical Society has a Moravian market that features local artisans who are making crafts that have been part of this community since the beginning. There's a candle tea that happens at the same time as Christmas Fest where you can enjoy some of the songs and the tea and bun that are part of the Moravian tradition, but also you can go on walking tours of the property and hear about the Christmas traditions of the Moravians. For more information about visiting Old Salem, here's where to find them online. It's such a beautiful, delicious way to learn about this part of North Carolina's history. And also, if you ask some of these living historians about their favorite weirdo stories, every single one of them that I talk to has one. I highly encourage you going to ask about their favorites and about their ghosts and reporting back about what you found.